7 rifles. Every one of them has already outlived the people who built them. Some fought through world wars. Some are still carried by soldiers right now. One is sitting in more American gun safes than almost any other rifle in history. If you want a rifle you'll never have to replace, start with number 7. Number 7 is the Ruger 10-22. Bill Ruger released this little .22 rifle in 1964, and he built it to sit alongside his .44 Magnum carbine as a companion piece. Nobody expected it to become the best-selling rifle platform in American history, but that is exactly what happened. Over 7 million have been sold, and the design has barely changed since the day it launched. The secret is the rotary magazine. Most .22 rifles from that era use stacked box magazines and the thin-rimmed .22 long rifle cartridge would jam and lock up inside them constantly. Ruger's engineer, Harry Sefrit, solved that problem with a 10-round rotary magazine that holds each cartridge in its own separate chamber inside a spinning wheel. There is no stacking, no rim lock, and almost nothing to jam. Sefrit also built in something called a breech block decelerator. It slows the bolt down just enough to give the rotary magazine time to feed the next round smoothly. That single part is why the 10-22 became known as one of the most reliable semi-automatic rifles ever made. This rifle uses a simple blowback action. There is no gas system and no complicated timing to wear out. The bolt just rides on machined grooves and cycles off the pressure of the fired round. Fewer moving parts means fewer things that can break, and that is the whole philosophy behind why this rifle has lasted so long. Navy SEALs have carried suppressed 10-22s on missions. Farmers use them to plink varmints. Kids learn to shoot on them. It works exactly the same for every single one of those people. Decade after decade, the aftermarket for this rifle is massive too. You can find replacement barrels, stocks, triggers, and magazines from dozens of companies, which means a 10-22 bought in 1970 can still be kept running today, with parts that did not even exist when it was built. That is the definition of a rifle made to last a lifetime. Buy one now, and there is a good chance your grandchildren will still be shooting it. Number 6 is the Marlin 336. Deer hunters have trusted this lever-action rifle since 1948, and it has never really left deer camp since. Marlin built the 336 off decades of lever gun development, going all the way back to designer L.L. Hepburn's work in the 1880s. What made the 336 different from older lever guns was its solid top receiver and side ejection port. Most lever actions before it, including Winchester's famous Model 94, ejected spent cases straight up through the top of the receiver. That meant you could not easily mount a scope, because the scope sat right in the path of the ejecting brass. Marlin solved that by ejecting cases out the side instead. That left the top of the receiver completely solid and flat, so hunters coming home from World War II with a new appreciation for optics could bolt a scope straight on top without any modification. It sounds like a small detail, but it is the reason the 336 became the deer rifle of choice for millions of American hunters through the back half of the 20th century. The action itself is built tough. It uses a solid steel locking bolt, and the receiver is machined from a single block of steel rather than stamped or welded together. That kind of construction holds up to decades of being knocked around in a truck bed, dropped in the mud, and passed hand to hand between family members every hunting season. Millions of 336s have been sold since 1948, most of them chambered in .3030 Winchester, which remains the cartridge that has killed more white-tailed deer in America than any other round ever made. The feeding system on the 336 earned a reputation of its own. Marlin engineers called it jam-proof when they first introduced it in 1948, and while no rifle is truly immune to every problem, the tubular magazine and improved carrier system made feeding failures rare compared to older lever guns. The rifle also uses a round bolt design instead of the flat bolts found in earlier Marlin lever actions, which spreads pressure more evenly and holds up better after tens of thousands of cycles. Remington took over Marlin production for a stretch of years, and quality control slipped during that period, which is something serious collectors will tell you honestly. But Ruger bought the Marlin brand in 2020 and brought manufacturing back to a dedicated facility in North Carolina with tighter tolerances and better fit and finish than the rifle had seen in decades. That means the 336 is not just a rifle from the past. It is still being built today with the same core design that made it a legend 75 years ago. A well-cared-for 336 will easily outlive its owner, and probably the next owner too. Number 5 is the Remington 700. When Remington introduced this rifle in 1962, nobody could have guessed it would go on to become the most popular bolt-action rifle ever made. More than 5 million have been sold since then, and it remains in production today. The reason this rifle earned that kind of trust comes down to one design idea that Remington engineer Mike Walker built into the action. Gunsmiths call it the 3 rings of steel. Here is what that means. The bolt face is recessed, so it wraps completely around the back of the cartridge. That bolt face then fits snugly inside the barrel, which forms the second ring. And the barrel itself threads directly into the receiver, forming the third ring. All 3 of these steel rings surround the cartridge case head at the moment of firing, containing the pressure from every angle. This is why Remington has advertised the 700 as the world's strongest bolt action for over 60 years, and nobody has seriously challenged that claim. Mike Walker did not stop there. He gave the 700 an extremely fast lock time of just 3.2 milliseconds, which is the amount of time between pulling the trigger and the firing pin striking the primer. A faster lock time means less chance for the rifle to move before the bullet leaves the barrel, which is part of why the 700 built a reputation as one of the most accurate factory rifles ever built in America. The United States military noticed too. In 1966, the Marine Corps built their M40 sniper rifle on the Remington 700 action, and Marine Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Hathcock carried one through Vietnam, becoming one of the most respected snipers in American military history. The Army later built the M24 sniper weapon system on the same action. Both platforms served for decades. When a rifle design is strong enough and accurate enough that 2 branches of the United States military choose to build their sniper programs around it, that tells you everything you need to know about how long it can last in the field. Number 4 is the Winchester Model 70, nicknamed the Rifleman's Rifle. This bolt action has been the benchmark other rifles get measured against since 1936. The rifles built between 1936 and 1963, known among collectors as the Pre-64 Model 70, are considered by many gunsmiths and hunters to be the finest production bolt-action rifles ever made in America. What set the Pre-64 apart was its Mauser-style controlled round feed system with a large non-rotating claw extractor. Picture a hook-shaped piece of steel that grabs onto the base of the cartridge the second it lifts out of the magazine. That claw holds the cartridge under full control all the way through the loading, firing, and ejection cycle. It never lets go. This matters because it means the rifle will feed and eject reliably no matter what angle you are holding it at, whether you are shooting uphill, downhill, or lying on your back in a foxhole. Cheaper push-feed designs that came later can fail to extract a case cleanly if the rifle is not held at the right angle. But a controlled feed action like the Model 70s simply will not let that happen. The receivers on these early rifles were forged from solid bar stock steel, then machined down to the final shape, which produces a stronger and more consistent action than stamped or cast alternatives. Winchester paired that strength with a 3-position safety that let hunters keep a round chambered safely while still being able to work the bolt to clear the rifle. a feature so well designed that other manufacturers have copied it for decades since. The Model 70 also served in combat. The Marine Corps used it as a sniper platform through World War II, Korea, before eventually shifting toward the Remington 700-based systems. Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Hathcock, one of the most respected snipers in Marine Corps history, relied on a Model 70 early in his career before later carrying a Remington platform. In 1964, Winchester changed the design to save money on manufacturing, switching to a cheaper push-feed extractor, and dropping some of the hand finishing that made the earlier rifles special. Hunters and collectors noticed immediately, and the change is still debated among riflemen today. Number 3 is the Mauser Karabiner 98K. This bolt-action rifle became the standard service rifle of the German military in 1935, and more than 14 million were manufactured before World War II ended in 1945. But the story of this rifle's toughness starts decades earlier, with the original Mauser 98 action patented in the late 1800s. That action is widely considered the most influential bolt-action design in the history of firearms, and almost every serious hunting rifle built since has borrowed something from it. The heart of the design is the controlled round feed system with its massive non-rotating claw extractor, the same basic concept that Winchester would later build into the Model 70. On the Kar 98K, that claw grips the rim of the cartridge the instant it leaves the magazine and never releases it until the empty case is thrown clear of the rifle. Combine that with dual locking lugs at the front of the bolt, and you get an action strong enough to handle powerful cartridges and rough battlefield treatment without ever losing reliability. Soldiers carried this rifle through mud, snow, sand, and freezing cold across every front of World War II, and the action kept functioning through conditions that would jam far more delicate designs. After the war, the story did not end. Countries across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East picked up surplus Kar 98K rifles and kept using them for decades, some converting them to fire newer NATO cartridges. Israel rebarreled thousands of them in the 1950s and 1960s and kept them in service long after Germany had moved on to other rifles. Gunsmiths still build custom hunting rifles on surplus 98 actions today, more than 100 years after Paul Mauser first patented the design. When a piece of steel engineering from the late 1800s is still strong enough and reliable enough that people are building brand new hunting rifles around it in the current century, you are looking at one of the toughest rifle designs ever created. Number 2 is the AK-47. Soviet engineer Mikhail Kalashnikov built this rifle to survive exactly the kind of abuse that destroys other firearms, and it has been proving that point since 1947. Roughly 100 million AK-47 pattern rifles have been produced worldwide, making it the most manufactured firearm in human history. No other rifle design comes close to that number. During the earliest testing of the design, engineers doused the rifle in sand and dirt, dragged it through swamps, and dropped it from height, then fired it without cleaning it first. In one especially brutal test, the rifle fired 15,000 rounds until the barrel glowed red hot, and it still cycled without jamming and without losing meaningful accuracy. That kind of punishment would destroy almost any other rifle on the planet, and it barely slowed this one down. The reason comes down to how the rifle was engineered. Kalashnikov built the AK-47 around a long-stroke gas piston system with generously loose tolerances between the moving parts. Tighter, more precisely fitted rifles can jam the instant sand or mud gets between their parts, because there is no room for that debris to go. The AK-47 was built the opposite way on purpose. There is enough space built into the design that dirt, sand, and fouling can build up without locking the action solid. The rifle keeps cycling even when it is filthy, which is exactly the kind of rifle you want if you are fighting in a jungle, a desert, or a frozen trench with no time to clean your weapon. Part of the reason this rifle survives so much abuse is how few moving parts it actually has. The operating mechanism uses roughly 8 major parts, which is far fewer than most modern rifles. Fewer parts means fewer things that can break, and it also means soldiers with almost no training can field strip the rifle, clean it, and put it back together in the field without any special tools. The 30-round curved magazine became just as famous as the rifle itself, instantly recognizable in photographs from nearly every conflict of the last 70 years. This rifle has fought in nearly every major conflict since the 1950s, from jungles in Vietnam to deserts across the Middle East and Africa. It remains the standard weapon for militaries and guerrilla forces across dozens of countries today, more than 75 years after it was designed. When a rifle can survive that much abuse, that much neglect, and that many decades of continuous use across the entire planet, it has earned its spot near the very top of this list before we get to the most durable rifle ever built. If you want to see the exact ammunition and gear that pairs perfectly with the rifles on this list, check the link in the description below. Number 1 is the M1 Garand General George S. Patton called this rifle the greatest battle implement ever devised. And after looking at what this rifle went through in World War II in Korea, it is hard to argue with him. Accepted by the United States Army in 1936, the M1 Garand became the first semi-automatic rifle ever issued as the standard weapon of a major military power, and it gave American soldiers a massive advantage over enemies still cycling bolt-action rifles by hand. The receiver is forged steel, not cast or stamped, which gives it the strength to absorb the repeated stress of semi-automatic firing without cracking or warping over time. Paired with a dense walnut stock that spreads out recoil evenly, the Garand was built to survive exactly the kind of treatment it received during the war. Soldiers dragged these rifles through the mud of Normandy, the jungles of the Pacific, and the frozen hills of Korea. They got dropped from landing craft, buried in foxholes, and fired thousands of rounds without proper cleaning, and the design kept working through all of it. The famous 8-round en-bloc clip system fed ammunition directly into the rifle, and then ejected itself automatically with a sharp metallic ping once the last round fired. That mechanism let American troops fire 40 to 50 rounds per minute of aimed semi-automatic fire, a rate that overwhelmed enemy riflemen working bolt actions one shot at a time. That firepower advantage played a direct role in battles across North Africa, Europe, and the Pacific Islands, from Normandy through Iwo Jima and Okinawa. What really proves the toughness of this rifle is what happened after the war ended. The M1 Garand stayed in official United States service until 1958, then went on to serve as a training and ceremonial rifle for decades after that. Original Garands from the 1940s are still being fired accurately on ranges today, more than 80 years after they were built, often with nothing more than a replacement stock or a new set of sights. The civilian marksmanship program has sold these surplus rifles to American citizens for decades, and demand for them has never really slowed down. In fact, the CMP has recently started producing brand new forged M1 Garand receivers, built to the exact same wartime specifications, because the demand for this rifle has never gone away. Steel that strong, combined with a design that's simple, is exactly why this rifle earned the #1 spot. It was built to survive the worst war in human history, and 80 years later, it is still doing exactly what it was built to do. 7 rifles, and every single one of them was built to outlast the person who bought it. From a little rimfire plinker that never jams to a battle rifle that fired 15,000 rounds without a single failure, these guns prove that the right steel and the right design will always beat a trend. Which one of these do you already own, or which one is going in your safe next? Drop it in the comments.